Hello, my name is Grzegorz Śpiewak, and today I am here to talk to you about how to teach a good lesson to teenagers. Notice it's a good lesson, not a whole program, because I believe that it is, if you can do it right on the level of a single lesson, then you just multiply that success by whatever number of times you need, and you will end up with a great course. Now, the second half of the title, More Ups Than Downs, merits a bit of explanation, and rather than tell you what this stands for, I have a little opening puzzle for you. The puzzle is to do with this graph. The graph, as you see, has certain words and one digit on it, the high and the low and the 50. So the question is, what do the words, what the question marks stand for, and then what's the 50? Is it 50 what? Okay, so I'm hoping that you have already guessed by now that the high versus low stands for attention. It's to do with attention span. And the 50 has to do with the number of minutes, and then the graph represents what happens to attention within the course of about 50 minutes. Now, you will appreciate that this is more or less the amount of time we have in any 45-minute lesson. So it's rather important to consider what happens to attention within a human, within the stretch of a lesson. Now, you might be saying, well, attention going down, that's probably the student's fault, right? Teenagers being uncooperative or something. No, it's not their fault. It's not your fault as such. Actually, it's nobody's fault, or if you like, it's everybody's fault, because we are all human, you see? And the graph and the great book, Brain Rules by John Medina, represents a considered view of what happens to human attention within this amount of time, more or less. We are all in the same boat, so to speak. Of course, given this, it is interesting that human attention is really at its highest, at its peak, at the beginning of that kind of stretch of time. Now, if you think about a lesson, it's a rather important moment, isn't it? Because this is when we don't actually teach yet, we do school administration, don't we? We check attendance. Perhaps we also make sure that they have everything that they are supposed to on their desks. We might also delve into checking homework. It's all very well, except by the time you finish, the attention will already start dropping rather considerably, right? What happens with attention towards the end? Well, it tends to go up again, does it not? Why does it go up? Well, perhaps it's not completely surprising. For one thing, the watches are working, and they can see that the lesson is about to stop, and they'll be ready to log back to Facebook, go on Twitter, or do something else important, right? But it's not just that. The end is when you negotiate certain important things for them, such as, for instance, is there going to be homework? How much? What's the deadline? Is there going to be a class test? When? How long? How much material? Of course they wake up, because it's vital information for their survival, so to speak, right? Now, what is important and crucial, perhaps, is this huge lump of time, if you like, the greatest lump of your lesson, where attention is biologically at its very lowest. And notice once it drops, and nothing else happens, it just stays there pretty much until the end when you start negotiating your next test. That's rather sad, isn't it? Now, but of course, I'm not here to kind of moan, but rather offer you something which is a bit of a solution that's simple, effective, and helps the biology work with you rather than against you. What's the solution? Well, the solution is you need to activate attention when it starts dropping. Very simple, but of course you need to have a strategy. The critical moment, remember, is about 10 minutes, because after the first initial 10 minutes, you get the first bottom level of attention, right? So what do we do in order to reactivate? Well, that's what Medina teaches us, you see. Medina says, look, if you're smart, you don't just let attention stay at its low level forever, but after about 10 minutes of whatever you do, you need a button that will reset that attention for the student and for yourself, of course, right? How do you do that? Well, the answer is actually very simple. You do recycling. Something you need to do anyway, do you not? And I'm sure you do, but a lot of people do recycling as one lump. Say, 30 minutes of class time at the beginning, or maybe towards the end. Well, see, if you do it like that, then chances are you will be hitting that low attention span anyway, you see? So why not divide recycling into smaller chunks which will, if you like, punctuate your main lesson plan and will help attention wake up. So you kill, if you like, two birds with one stone, right? You will reset attention, and at the same time you will do the necessary recycling, which we know we need to do independently. Now, how would you do that sort of recycling? Well, I suggest you need a whole range of fun, small and varied activities. I don't think I have to explain to you why it is that they should be fun. Because, if attention is already relatively low, then you won't wake them up if you give them something which is not somehow attractive to them, right? Why should they be small? Because, of course, you do not want to divert from your main lesson plan forever. You just want a reset of attention, and then you go back to your normal lesson plan. And varied, well, the varied perhaps merits a bit of extra explanation. So the reason why we need variety of those tasks is that if you treat them to the same kind of brain resetter, sadly, the beneficial effect of the resetting wears off after a period. Okay? Now, at this point, you would be excused for thinking, my goodness, that's rather a lot of new things on my plate. But as the slide suggests, it's not really rocket science. In fact, and that's the best part, I'm trying to convince you in the rest of this session that everything you need is already sitting in a good modern course book. All you want is you want to reactivate material which already got covered. And in other words, you will do your normal recycling when it is needed. Mind you, I am sure you are already doing recycling activities with your students, but chances are you may be doing them as a lump. First you cover something new and then you do revision. Well, I suggest to you that if you do that, you are perhaps not working alongside this attention climb. So you are perhaps not tuning in to the ups and the downs as much as you could. So if you spread your recycling activities a little bit more systematically, a little bit more smartly, so to speak, then you will be using the logic and the biology of attention to your favor. And that's what I would like to turn to for the rest of this session. How can we do this? As I said, I am confident that you need to do little to nothing in way of preparation. In fact, all you need to do is revisit material which you already covered with your learners, say, last week, 2 weeks ago, not a long time ago, but sufficiently long time ago for them to perhaps not have it fresh in their memory. How do we dip? Well, imagine you covered something in your normal lesson plan last week. Such as, for instance, you did some vocabulary, in this case it's vocabulary of recycling, rather conveniently, which the student, as part of that lesson plan, needed to reorganize, reclassify by assigning it into one of the 4 categories, right? That's what happened last week. Now we are doing something else. Can you not revisit this material? Of course you can. It's completely preparation free. All you need is get students into pairs and ask one student to look back at that very page with this collection of vocabulary items. The other student critically cannot look at this point. They must be looking away. And the student who has access to vocabulary needs to pick one item and whisper it into the student's ear. The student's role is simply to understand what got whispered and then assign it as quickly as they can into one of the original categories. As simple as that. And then you swap them around and you repeat the procedure. And you swap them around again if you want, and basically you've reset their attention already, right? And then you go back to your normal lesson plan. Now, what's going on? Ah, I know what's going on, you see. 10 minutes, more or less, have passed, you see? So if at this point your attention has already started drifting away a little and you started thinking, what am I going to make for dinner tonight? Or, have I already done my shopping for today? Oh my goodness, I forgot the milk. It's not your fault. Actually, it's not my fault either. It's your human biology, you see, ready to be reset. Remember? So, how about stopping this recording for a moment, going away, stretching, maybe making yourself a good cup of coffee, and returning for the next 10 minutes. That's where you treat yourself to something which makes you human and you accept it. Right? Accept the same with your students. By the way, a physical reset, of course, is a good reset, and you can take advantage of it in your lesson as well. One physical reset per lesson would be great. But remember what I told you earlier. First of all, you can't just have physical resets all the time, because that would diminish the effects of those resets. And secondly, if you only did physical ones, in a sense, you would not be using that time to do the language recycling, right? So what I suggest, again, is a healthy mixture. Some physical, some linguistic, and I think you're there, okay? Now, for the rest of today, I would like to offer you a few of those attention reset activity types, okay? Remember again that I need one such thing more or less every 10 minutes of any good lesson plan, okay? So how can we, what resource can we draw on? Of course, the resource is your own student's book. Okay, the book, apart from collections of vocabulary like the one I showed you before the break, also contains, almost regularly these days, Interface 2 certainly does, contains word lists at the end of each unit. So if you already covered this unit with this word list and you're already in the next unit, I think that particular word list is waiting to be reactivated for the sake of resetting attention, right? So what do we do with this one? Well, tons of ideas possible, but just one would be to give them, again, in pairs or groups of 3, a small section of that word list, not the whole one, say 15 items, 20 items at the most with stronger groups. And you tell them, look, your task for the next few minutes is to divide them into 3 categories. Okay, what categories? Well, I call them wacky for the sake of this activity, because I want to make completely no link to the meaning, you see, of those categories. So in my particular example, the 3 categories are suitcase, fridge, and dustbin. Which of the words in this particular list do you think could belong to the suitcase, the fridge, and the dustbin? Now, you will be excused for thinking, well, they have nothing to do with them. Well, that's the whole point of this activity, you see. Of course, at one level, you could say, well, the words that go into the suitcase are the words which we need, right? To carry them around with ourselves. The words that go into the fridge are the words which we freeze for later, yeah, not now. And the words that go into the dustbin, words that are not needed, perhaps, right? Well, how can you pedagogically accept the fact that students say certain words are not needed, you might wonder? Well, the answer is, don't worry, because you see, brain science suggests that even the words which go into the dustbin get remembered better. Why? Well, the simple answer is because the brain has performed extra mental activity, the classifying and the reclassifying upon a set of items. And once this happens, long-term retention improves. Okay? Of course, my 3 categories are not the point of this activity, any 3 categories, which of course makes this operation potentially very varied, and you can treat students to that sort of thing, every 2 or 3 weeks very easily. You could, for instance, ask them to give the words on the list to 3 different people, famous people. Or you could ask them to arrange the words into 3 different places around their house. It really completely doesn't matter what the words are and where they go. What matters is, once again, the fact that they have to classify, the brain performs extra mental operation, and that their attention gets reset for the next 10 minutes of proper teaching of whatever it is on your current lesson plan today. Okay, so the critical thing again is the 10 minutes, right? You have them then for the next 10 minutes, and then you need to do something else again. Such as what? Well, another one you could do is a variety of a technique which I'm sure you all know, the old but very good technique of dictogloss. I call this express dictation for the sake of today. Why express? Because of course, if you run a proper dictogloss activity with your students, it takes up quite a bit of time. The way this normally works is you choose a very short text, and by short I mean between 30 and 50 words. That's quite enough. with pre-intermediate-ish learners. With this text, you tell them to close their books. It's a familiar text, remember, they covered it last week or maybe 2 weeks ago for something else, like, verbs that they needed to put in a particular tense. Fine, so they know roughly the meaning of the text, they did something else with it. Today, you tell them, close your books. Remember that text about Brad Pitt, for instance? I'm going to dictate a section of this text for you, right? Once only, normal speed, and no mercy. Why the 3? Well, that's the dictogloss research, you see, because it says when you do that and you ask them to hold the text in memory so that they can take it down in writing after you finish, you will create natural information gaps, won't you? Because it's virtually impossible for anyone to remember exactly the 30 or 50 words in the sequence that they heard it once only at normal speed, right? So why express dictation for this activity's sake? Because instead of doing the whole dictogloss sequence where they first take down the text from memory, then they turn to their neighbor, compare, try and fill a few of those gaps they have, then perhaps turn to another person or group of 4. We don't have time for this because it's express dictation and we want a reset only. For the sake of this activity, all that you need is the dictation phase, then the writing down phase, and then go back to the book and check. Right? It's a great reason to revisit something that otherwise is already done. So it's good old-fashioned recycling in a sense, but it does something else. It helps attention refocus, right? In a good modern book, such as, Interface 2, to take one example, there will be a number of ready-made short texts waiting, begging to be reactivated like that. So, pick your favorite and do it every fortnight with them as one of the resets for that great lesson, right? So that you have something great for the next 10 minutes to do with your learners. Another very similar type of thing, again, I repeat, based on absolutely no preparation on your part, no handouts, no extra private time, nothing. Lexical chunks chase. How does this work? Well, all you need is a bunch of items, similar items like verbs, which you covered for, say, a grammatical purpose a week or 2 weeks ago. What you do is you tell them, look, go back to page 58 in your book, such as Interface 2, and rearrange the words in a vertical sequence. Now we have your vertical sequence, and you're ready for my quick reset activity. Whoever does the activity first gets a plus. And the activity is, for every single verb, try and come up with one collocation, one phrase that this verb goes with. It's not rocket science. You expect very basic things, but meaningful things, right? Fun, an element of suspense, an element of competition. It will probably take 3-4 times altogether. The person that completes it first gets a plus. Everyone's happy, and the attention is reset for the next 10 minutes of your lesson plan. That's the whole magic of this methodology, right? Perhaps one more little example is something which, again, is almost begging to be reactivated in a good book like Interface, which is dialogues. Dialogues, spoken language, if they are laid out nicely, like they are in Interface, they are almost ready-made material for all kinds of reactivation and recycling activities. So let me just give you one or two to finish with. Imagine you covered this dialogue last week. You want to use it for a reset. So what you do, again, you put your students in pairs. They can't look at the other half of the dialogue. They only work on their half, right? So the one who's looking at their half on the left needs to remove all the grammatical words from their half of their dialogue, right? So they will end up with 4 or 5 items which look like those on the left-hand side of the slide now. Of course, the other person could be doing exactly the same. On the half of the dialogue, you collect the pieces of paper once they finish, and you're done for the sake of this reset, by the way, because I think this will already take the right amount of time. But notice, now you have student-produced material, which you can recycle next lesson, maybe 2 lessons into the future, and offer them the very same material they produced themselves. You might swap that material between the 2 pairs, so that everyone is looking on something that their colleague has produced, and they need to re-grammaticalize the dialogue, right? That's one way to run this. Another way would be to say, okay, person A is doing the de-grammaticalizing of the dialogue, while person B is doing something else. They need to scramble the words in each of their lines. And, for stronger students, you might say, and your task is to scramble in such a way that no two words anywhere can actually appear in a correct sequence. It actually is quite a challenge, believe you me. Okay, so you could be doing that, you could be doing the de-grammaticalizing only. The important thing is that you have yet another technique which you can very easily apply. Then you have something that the student produced, their attention got reset, and you are ready for your next 10 minutes of a fantastic lesson where their attention will be activated biologically. Okay, you've also done your revision. So you're killing so many words, so many birds with your stone, I can't even imagine. In sum, all I'm trying to argue for the sake of today is something small, but I hope significant, which is that, if you want excellence, excellence is a matter of attitude. So rather than working against something which is part of your students being human, you work along and with it. And if you're smart, your lesson will be great. Thank you very much for listening, and good luck.